Student loans are canceled. Oh, wait, no, they're not. Yes, they are. Well, here comes a lawsuit. So maybe kind of not, but they are, but they're some of them, maybe. It's been an endlessly confusing time for many people on Twitter, as I've seen a lot of people very confused about this week's multiple announcements that were kind of not announcements, but were mostly just seen within a single text post on Twitter. And then the information was covered by maybe one or two YouTubers, none of the major ones, and none of the major news networks as far as I saw covered it either. So the confusion is understandable. But what actually happened this week, and are you impacted? But first, if you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to give this video a like so that YouTube recommends it to more people. So whether or not you think college is worth it, the reality is millions of people have millions of dollars in student loan debt. And millions sounds actually quite nice because obviously it's in the trillions. And I think that's where we should start this video. Where does the current landscape look for student loan debt? 41 million Americans hold student loans, equaling $1.75 trillion in student loan debt. That is crippling. That is terrible. Out of any kind of debt to have, that's not producing a return like on any well-leveraged real estate, but at least it's not on a depreciating asset either, like a vehicle. 33% of those borrowers owe $10,000 in student loans. 20% owe between $10,000 and $20,000 in student loans. 21% owe between $20,000 and $40,000 in student loans. 18% owe between $40,000 and $100,000 in student loans. And 7% owe over $100,000 in federal student loans. Over $100,000. That's insane. That is house money for a piece of paper. Now, luckily, a lot of these pieces of paper do actually create a return on that investment. Is it worth $100,000 of debt, likely which some would be high interest? Is it worth $10,000 in debt? I did cover that topic in a separate video, which you can walk by clicking this annotation. So a few weeks back, the Biden administration announced that they would be forgiving up to $20,000 in federal student loans per borrowers, but that's $20,000 if you were a Pell Grant recipient or up to $10,000 if you were not. Now, to qualify for this, you will have had to make less than $150,000 as a single person or less than $300,000 as a married couple. Now, if you take all the federal student loan debt that is owed back and you level it out across everyone who owes federal student loans, this would equate to an average of $28,950 per borrower. So for the vast majority of people that are having $10,000 forgiven, they're still going to have pretty much $20,000 in federal student loan debt on average. And remember, there is a valid argument to be said that, well, why is a taxpayer who never got a college degree helping someone who did get a college degree and is now more likely to make more money? But you have to remember that 40% of people who hold student loans never got a degree. And the fact that 25% of federal student loan borrowers have to have their minimum monthly payments equal 25% of their income, that's just insanity. So really, it doesn't matter if I or anyone agrees with the policy or disagrees with the policy. One thing we can all agree on is that we're happy for the people who are impacted, happy for the people who are seeing less debt burden their life. I've seen personally, just on my shows, people who have been deeply impacted by federal student loans that they just couldn't get out of, who are now having a weight lifted off their chest, and I celebrate with them. And again, that doesn't impact if we agree or disagree with the policies. We can be happy for other people. But now we're hearing the news. No more cancellation. The Biden administration just decided they're not going to cancel any more student debt or something like that I was seeing all over Twitter. A lot of misinformation, as you know, it's Twitter. But what's actually happening? What happened this week? Really, the main thing that's going on is that the Biden administration really wants this policy to take hold, and with the lawsuits that are coming in from different states, they're trying to avoid some of those being tied up in court or having the whole policy get struck down. Though, of course, this was a policy move directed from the executive branch to the Department of Education and not a law passed by Congress. Just to be extra clear for those who might be questioning and going to the comments immediately to say that. So of course, anytime a president really does anything, especially from an executive standpoint, it's always challenged, no matter who it is. And it's just, big old game of politics, no matter who's impacted. Midterms are coming up. The Biden administration wants to give red meat to his base. The Republicans on the other side of the aisle want to give red meat to their base. They tend to really dislike student loan forgiveness, especially from an executive standpoint. And a lot of people from the Biden base, they really want student loan forgiveness to go through, if not more than we're already seeing today. So red meat for everyone. This is pure keto out there, and vegetarians are very upset. So the first thing that happened that was quietly announced, in order to avoid a certain lawsuit that was kind of based on forcing people to have their debt forgiven, now people can opt out of it. So that was just kind of a legal loophole that people were trying to do in order to get this struck down. And now the Biden administration announced that people can opt out of it, and that should hopefully for the Biden administration on their end, when if they want to get what they want, it should avoid the lawsuit and the legal fights from that end. And the second thing that was even quieter was the FFEL loans. What's an FFEL loan, you ask? Because pretty much no one has heard of it other than the few million that have it. Unless you're older, I guess. Maybe I'm just too young because, these haven't existed for quite a while now. But what's an FFEL loan? It stands for Federal Family Education Loan. Essentially, it was a program where you'd be borrowing from private institutions for your student loans, and it was federally backed by the government, in the most simplistic description possible. The FFEL program ended in 2010, and now all federal loans are made through the William D. Ford Federal Direct Loan Program. Such a catchy name, great brand ambassadors we have up there. Essentially, people are arguing in this lawsuit that this was going to negatively impact those private institutions in which these loans were made through that the federal government was securing. And in the new forgiveness program, the federal government was saying that you can consolidate these loans into the federal program and then have them forgiven that way. But in order to avoid the whole thing being struck down in a legal fight, Biden administration is like, okay, maybe not the FFEL loans anymore. So really, to be clear, the Biden administration isn't saying they want people with FFEL loans to be, just straddled with that debt forever. They're just trying to make sure the majority of the program goes through and avoiding those legal fights. But who's impacted by this? There's about 4 million borrowers currently holding FFEL loans. But when asked about this, the Biden administration saying that less than 800,000 of them would be impacted. Doesn't really make sense, and no one really has any concrete numbers around this, and people are kind of estimating it's going to be more in the millions, but maybe not that full 4 million. But the sad reality is that these type of loans ended 12 years ago, so if people still have them today, they're having a hard time paying it off in the traditional 10-year repayment program. So this debt is still held disproportionately among people of color in low-income communities, or else it would be paid off quicker. So the people impacted by this lawsuit and the actions surrounding the avoidance of it are the people who this program is trying to help the most. So again, agree or disagree with the overall forgiveness, this is kind of a sad outcome for the legal fight. Now, I haven't really shared any personal opinions around this, and I don't get into politics here. That's not what this channel is about. It's about math, it's about finances, and it's about everyone's life. And that's where I get a little more emotionally charged on this. This is impacting people's lives, their day-to-day lives and their plans for the future, as everyone needs to financially plan for their future. It's kind of a similar argument that's been made among different businesses when it comes to regulations. Obviously, businesses prefer less regulations in general, but when asked about it, when it comes to more regulation and less regulation, what they ask for is just to know what the heck is going on. When one party does more regulation, the other party comes into power and they do less. This is back and forth and back and forth and back and forth forever. When asked about it, they say, if it's going to be more regulations, fine, but just keep it that way so we can actually plan as a business for multiple years down the road, multiple decades down the road. We can't just keep going back and forth. And the same thing is happening here. Are people's loans going to be forgiven or not? The repayments and interest being incurred is going to start at the beginning of the year. People need to plan. So whether or not the forgiveness is a good or bad thing, I don't care. That's not a part of this conversation. People need to plan. People need to stop being effed with for political gain. And I get the red meat. I get what it takes to win in the midterms. It's all about that base. No trouble. But these are people's lives. Figure out what you want to do and just let that be the program. The uncertainty surrounding people's money is one of the biggest insecurities and anxiety-inducing things in this country. People need to know what is going on, and the elected body of the people should respect that a little better. And that's not a right or left thing. That's just a common sense thing. So, a little bit of a Sunday rant, but if you liked it, subscribe and stick around for more. Love you. Thanks.